The city of Orlando is offering some support for victims of the tragedy in Orlando. They're having a press conference right now. Let's listen in.
People are not going to know that name just yet, so if you could also use formerly known as the Citrus Bowl or however you want to use it, but use both names as you could, if you could, in whatever information you're giving out. So the outpouring of support from the Orlando community and really the nationally and internationally has been tremendous. We started the One Orlando Fund just yesterday, and we have already received nearly $2.5 million in hand or pledges. That fund will help us respond to the needs of the community almost immediately, and most especially in time to come from the effects of the Pulse tragedy. But today we continue on our road to recovery, and we know it's going to be a long road for the families of victims who are deceased, victims who were injured or wounded, the family and friends, and even those who were simply at Pulse and witnessed the events, as well as our first responders and anybody that has been involved in that. So in partnership with the federal, state, local, and community agencies, we are today opening the City of Orlando Family Assistance Center. And this assistance center will provide all of the necessary support for victims all in one location. So you can imagine all the different types of things that a victim or the family might need. So we have child and family services, we have counseling, grief counseling, crime victim services, lodging, funeral services, ground transportation. A number of airlines have stepped up to say that we will provide transportation for loved ones that need to travel here or back home, language translation, and more. So I would like to recognize Mayor Jacobs and Orange County for the many services that they are providing. The county provides most of the social services in the area, so they are a huge part of this and playing a big role. Mayor Jacobs.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer. As Mayor Dyer said, the outpouring of support we've had from this community is absolutely overwhelming, and we're appreciative to Mayor Dyer and this Camping World Stadium, aka the Citrus Bowl, for having this space available to help those who are recovering. We are also working with our first responders to make sure that we're providing the crisis assistance, the crisis debriefing that is necessary. As you know, this was the greatest tragedy our community has ever witnessed. And I want to thank each of you for the role that you have played. We had intended to have a very brief press conference this afternoon with everything that's going on. We probably won't do that, so let me just give you a brief update on the ME's office and their efforts. They have done a heroic effort of identifying, working with FDLE, working together to make sure that we could reach out to the family members as quick as possible. I think they've done an outstanding job, and I know if we're talking about families that were waiting for that news, it was always too long, but they've done a phenomenal job. They have completed all the autopsies. The autopsies will not be released to the press because they're still subject to the ongoing investigations, but they are completed, and we are on our way to giving the families the opportunity to have that closure. That is a crucial part of our role and responsibility. It's just a little bit that we can do, but we're proud of our ME. He just officially started serving today. He was appointed by our board yesterday, and he's doing a phenomenal job, and we look forward to introducing him to the public in the near future. Thank you very much.
A couple questions.
Yes. How am I doing, or how's he doing? You know, I'm doing very well. This is a very difficult time. I appreciate all the prayers that I've received, but I will tell you, I ricochet every prayer to those who are really in need. Thank you for asking. I'm doing very well. We are very focused on what we need to do to help the victims and to help their families, and I think that's made it easier to be able to do something. So I know that's the way our entire community feels. That's why we had 5,000 people show up and want to give blood, because they feel the same way. And that's what makes us so special as a community, as a country, because 9 out of 10 people want to do good and want to help. And those 9 out of 10 people and their love and their caring will overcome the evil that we find in 1 out of 10. But thank you so much for asking.
You know, like Mayor Jacobs, I'm staying busy, so you don't really have time to reflect on the enormity of it. And I've talked to so many people that they want to do something, and they're not really able to do something other than to pray or offer words of encouragement or support, or go stand in line for 2 or 3 hours to give blood. That's an example of how much this community wants to support everybody. And it's hard to say we might find a silver lining in this whole thing, but the way that our community has come together and stood united and started thinking about different ways to approach each other. Last night we were at an interdenominational prayer service that had representation from many different churches and religions, and there were many from the LGBTQ community there, and there was a lot of reflection by those who might not have been supportive of that community in the past, and there's some healing, and I think that there's going to be more understanding, more discussion, more willingness to be open and embrace diversity and equality. So if there's anything at all that can come good out of this, it's the fact that we stand more united than ever, and that we are more understanding of each other. You know, in terms of this service center, everyone has stepped up. We have the services. I just can't tell you in terms of, let's just start with funerals. So the Funeral Directors Association has stepped up. So many churches have stepped up and said, if you need a venue, we're going to offer our venue for free. We have provided, or we are providing, plots in Greenwood Cemetery for any of the victims that would like to utilize those services. So the outpouring of support has been incredible, and it's really almost tough being the clearinghouse to try to use all these services. And while I have just a second, Mayor Jacobs hit on this, I really appreciate our local press that has been so professional and responsive and told the story of the victims and the healing, and you guys have a job to do, and I know that your job has been just as tough as my job, Mayor Jacobs' jobs, our first responders over the course of the last several days. I know you're all tired. When we were doing the press conferences over on Orange Avenue, the second day I saw people that had been sitting just like this, and everybody was sunburned. They had on different clothes so you could see all the sunburn lines on everybody. So I don't accept that there's anybody that hasn't been affected by this, so I appreciate what you're doing with your jobs. Each of us are picking up our own services, but the FBI is the clearinghouse, so they'll be the intake when the families and well, the victims and the families come in. The FBI will be the initial clearinghouse, but as I mentioned, we have counseling, and whatever group is here to provide the services, they are picking up the cost of that. So we're picking up the cost of using the facility, for instance. We have use of the whole thing. So on the concourse, we have booths, I guess you would say. So they're in an order that would be, you can come in and then go to the places where you think you might need either legal help or counseling help or help with travel or help with funeral arrangements or how do you get your death certificate or just anything that you can think of. And then because we have suites and all types of rooms, we can do more private activities if somebody needs some private counseling. So we have use of the whole building, and we have the ability to handle anybody that might come here. In terms of the One Orlando money, so what we don't want to do is duplicate money that might be available from the federal or the state. So, for instance, Attorney General Bondi talked about the fact that their victim assistance will pay for funerals. So we don't want to use the One Orlando money for something that the state could provide money for or the federal government can provide money for. So we see the One Orlando money probably as being a little bit more longer term needs. And I can't anticipate everything that might be right now. You know, there's a lot of people spending a lot of time that haven't had much sleep, and there's a lot of different things. I think the mayor would agree with me, and I'll let her talk to this, but the continuum of things that we've done, you start out, number one, with an active shooter. So that's the first part. And then after that's over, it's clearing the crime site that we believe is laced or booby-trapped with bombs from everything that the killer had said and from information we had received from people that were inside. So it took a while with the robot to get the scene clear. And then immediately you turn to wanting to get the victims moved to the medical examiner and getting them identified and the families notified. And I can't express the level of appreciation I have for the medical examiner's team and the FDLE, who were primarily responsible for that action to get all 49 victims identified overnight. And then by mid-afternoon, we had made notification to all 49 families. That's pretty extraordinary. And when you go into something like that, you're not thinking about that aspect of it till you're there. And then the next day, yesterday, I spent more with legal procedures on how do we set up the One Orlando Fund, how do we set up the Assistance Center, and then today we're moving back towards the support for the individuals and the families. So every day brings a little bit different challenge. Mayor.
Thank you. Let me also announce, as we're talking about people and corporations who are doing so much to help. JP Morgan Chase just, I had a lunch schedule with Mel Martinez, and he just called to say that they will be contributing $500,000 to the One Orlando Fund. And let me also say this, you know, what we do with that money, obviously the city will help decide, but as I said at our meeting that we dedicated to this loss, this is an opportunity, as Mayor Dyer said, this is an opportunity for us as a community to learn how to care more, how to understand more. And I think we owe it to every one of those victims to reevaluate as a society, and certainly as a Central Florida society, how we treat those who think and feel differently than we do. Last night was the most dramatic change I have ever seen in how our churches respond to the LGBTQ community. The night before that, my Catholic church, and it's sometimes been a little hard to be Catholic, to be honest with you, but we have a Pope who has brought a new light and a new way of thinking. And our Catholic church dedicated their service to the community. Last night, seeing all of those faith-based leaders, all of the pastors that came together to say we want to hug and we want to pray with those in the LGBT community that are either directly affected or indirectly affected. That's transformational. About what? I think there's definitely a time for us to rethink, where is that compromise that I think most citizens across the country believe is appropriate. And definitely, I think we need to be having that conversation as a community. Let me also say, as you say, what can you do? We talked about this. What each citizen can do in this community is they can search in their own heart and soul and think about whether or not they are treating everyone in this community with love and compassion and understanding. Thank you, and thank you so much, Scott. I was just going to mention that. In a few days, as Mayor Dyer talked, this has been a continuum. The work keeps changing, and to learn that the next effort may be dealing with an organization that is coming here to spread a message of hate and fear after what we've just been through is most troubling. But it is a call for our entire community to rally behind what we believe in, and that is love and understanding. And tolerance is not sufficient. We need to cherish our differences, and we need to cherish our people. So I am hoping that we see an outpouring of love from our citizens at every event that we have, to show that support, especially in the face of what we're about to be confronted with. Scott, thank you for asking. And we're also looking at it, obviously, from a public safety. I know the Sheriff's Office, I know OPD will be taking this very seriously.
Let me clarify one thing that I hope I made clear, but if I didn't, this service center is not just for people who were, the families of people who are deceased or were injured. It's also for anybody that was in the club. There's certainly going to be mental trauma as well as physical trauma. So the president will be here tomorrow. How much has been released about that? Okay. The president will be here tomorrow. I was just instructed not much has been said about what's going to happen. I was in touch with the president and have been in touch with the White House throughout the course of the last several days. He indicated that he would like to come visit and comfort and show support and unity with Orlando and the victims, but he did not want to get in the way. Obviously, a presidential visit comes with a lot of security and a lot of things that you have to do. So we chose Thursday to get past the initial stages of this. He will be here during the course of the day on Thursday. Probably later today, we'll release the locations that he will visit. One of the things that the White House did for us immediately, Orlando Health had indicated to me early on that as they were getting victims and they had all the families in the waiting room, some of the HIPAA regulations were interfering with them providing information to the families, and the White House was able to talk with the appropriate agencies to get relief and a waiver of some of the HIPAA rules so that they could more freely communicate who they actually had and were treating in the hospital. A little louder.
Everything is flooding in right now. I know it's early, but what is being talked at this point?
We've started discussions. Nothing is formalized. I'll talk off the cuff, so don't hold me to this. But we have enough space at Greenwood that if all 50 victims wanted to be buried there in one area, they could be, and it is near the street, so we could, if that turns out to have a large number of the victims, we could do some formal memorial there, thought being that people could, if they're going to leave mementos, flowers, it would be easily accessible from the road rather than going necessarily into the cemetery. But beyond that, we have not formalized anything.
Let me mention, at a minimum, our History Center will be recognizing this day and this loss and what it means in our community. So we'll be working together, as I mentioned, with the funds that the city has collected. You know, that perhaps that's something you're looking at. The county is certainly willing and anxious to be able to participate, but the History Center is already a location, I think, that needs to memorialize and remember what happened, why, that it be a lesson for future generations. Thanks for asking, Scott.
We'll take one more question.
We started debriefing yesterday, so the firefighters, Orange County, City of Orlando, Seminole counties are debriefing together. And when I say debriefing, they're not going back and saying, here's what I did and let's reconstruct the scene. It's providing them with counseling, letting them know that, yeah, you guys are really tough guys, but it's going to hit you. Don't be afraid to do this. I actually sat in on a little bit of it, and the counselors were saying you need to eat like you usually eat. You try to get back to the regular routine that you have. You need not to be out of the ordinary. So we know that it's been traumatic for everybody, and we do know that we need to provide a lot of support. While we're at that, we had 11 officers that were involved in the shooting during the course of the evening. So they've been relieved of duty, and they can't talk about this right now. There's still an active investigation. So I don't think it's the local folks. I think it's more the national folks that are camped out in their yards and calling their parents. Please leave the officers that were involved in this shooting alone. We'll make them available at some appropriate time, but right now is not that appropriate time. So I would ask you not to try to contact the officers that were involved. I think we've been pretty open in providing information and access to everything that we possibly can. So I again would ask you, please leave those officers alone. And as you visit with victims of their families, please be respectful of them as well. Thank you very much for coming this morning.
Yeah, I think so.